who can win the national title in 2024?
It's a very crafty play calls down here. Instead, they just hand it this time to Quora. Steps back, breaks a tackle. Touchdown, Michigan.
Today we set out to answer that question not in our usual short form format, but this time in a long form video, starting with all 134 FBS teams, and we're going to narrow it down through the process of elimination. Now, what we're going to be using to narrow them down is going to be historical data and criteria that is based on what other teams have done in the same era of college football. So we're not going to be plucking stuff from the 1940s, because what teams did to win national titles in the 1940s and even as recently as the 1990s is not the same as what people have used in the playoff era. So we're going to be using those trends to narrow it down from 134 teams. So look at all the teams in all their glory. Kennesaw State joining the mix as team 134. And without further ado, let's start to trim these teams down to find out who can win the national title for 2024. For our first criteria, we're going to trim the field in half right off the bat. Must be in a power conference. Now, the term power conference doesn't mean what it used to even in the last iteration of college football. There was the Power Five and the Group of Five clearly defined. You could even argue that in the current landscape, there's a Power Two, and I'm sure you've heard that before. The SEC and Big Ten clearly better top to bottom than the ACC and Big 12, but for now, they're all still power conferences. And when you look at the last couple decades, and really ever since it's been a thing, no team outside of a perceived power conference has been able to win it all. That's due to a number of factors. The fact that they get more money, the fact that they have better resources, the fact that any team that's been worth enough to be in a power conference is in a power conference. And the exception to that is Notre Dame, obviously. So that's why the criteria actually states must be in a power conference or just be Notre Dame. The Irish are a team that have shown they don't necessarily have to be in a power conference. They still play a power schedule, and they're a team that year in and year out is going to compete at a national high level for a national title, even though they're not in a power conference. For now, I've excluded Oregon State and Washington State from this criteria, which seems a bit controversial to some on either end of the spectrum, but as it currently stands, they're not really in a power conference, but it's honestly not going to mean that big of a deal because they'd be eliminated by some later criteria. So we move forward with the teams that are left. For our next criteria here, we're going to say something that you've probably heard before if you're a college football fan, which is you must meet the 50% blue chip ratio, or some people just call it the blue chip ratio. And basically what that is the number of players that were 4- and 5-star recruits on your roster, blue chip players, is at least 50%, at least half of your roster. It's been true ever since they started tracking recruiting data that the team that wins the national title has at least half of their team made up of blue chip recruits. So that leaves us with these teams, some of them pretty surprising on there. There's obviously the unsurprising, the Ohio States, Oregon, Florida, LSU, Notre Dame, Florida State, USC. A lot of those blue blood programs shouldn't be a surprise here, but the ones that kind of make you raise an eyebrow, Colorado, how about that? Coach Prime acquiring talent. We've all seen it, but seeing they actually made the cut for the blue chip ratio this year, it doesn't guarantee anything, doesn't guarantee them even a bowl game or anything crazy like that, but it is interesting to see that's how the talent on their roster has reached. And then you've got teams like South Carolina and Auburn recruiting really well in the SEC, and it's paid off for a roster that technically meets one of the requirements for what it takes roster-wise to win a national title. There's still a team like Clemson on here that some would argue has fallen off a little bit. They still meet the requirement. Michigan was surprisingly close to missing this requirement, but they were kind of notorious last year for winning a national title without a supremely talented roster. So this trims down the field even more significantly, only left with pretty serious teams, but let's go ahead and trim it down even more. The next criteria is going based off of the playoff era, which I think is appropriate because we're in the playoff era. Well past it, actually. It's a 12-team playoff this year, but in the 4-team playoff era, you must have had an NFL caliber quarterback or a generational running back in order to win the national title. Every team that won a national title went and had an NFL caliber quarterback, and the one year that they didn't was 2015 Alabama. They had Jake Coker at quarterback, and that's why I leave the generational running back thing there, because they had Derrick Henry, and that essentially nullified everything. So some interesting cuts here. Auburn, notably, a team that just got bumped off. Peyton Thorne is not an NFL caliber quarterback. Michigan doesn't necessarily have a guy that's ready. I'm aware they have the highly touted recruit coming in, but he's so young and so unproven that you just aren't sure yet. A team like Florida with Graham Mertz didn't make the cut. If it was close, I went ahead and kept him on. Like, for example, with Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava, it seems like he's going to be a star. We've already seen him show a flash. Same with USC's Miller Moss. So to me, it's a little different than just going completely based off of potential, but having actually seen something that says, this guy's probably NFL caliber. Same goes with Jackson Arnold in Oklahoma. At least he's shown us some stuff on the field between the white lines to say, this guy could be NFL caliber. With Texas A&M, it's a little iffy. I will not lie. It's Wegman. I feel like the jury's kind of still out, so you could take off A&M too if you wanted to, but that leaves us with these teams that I think meet that criteria, but let's continue to narrow it down. This next criteria is going to pick on one team in particular, and it's not something I did on purpose, but it's just how it panned out, because I think this is a necessary criteria, and that's you must be top 20 in recruiting the year you win the national title. Now, Michigan really extended the criteria here. Last year when I did this, the criteria was you must be top 11 in recruiting, and that's because Clemson won the national title the year they were the 11th ranked team in the recruiting rankings. Michigan this last year won as the 17th ranked team in recruiting rankings, which completely shifts the goalpost there. So top 20, Michigan showed you can do it if you're operating in that range. The only team eliminated by this criteria is the Colorado Buffaloes. Like I said, it seems like I'm picking on them. I'm not. I just think that's necessary, having talent flowing into your roster at a high level through recruiting. I suppose you could say, hey, the portal era is new. You don't necessarily need that. But Colorado's the only team that gets picked off there. I do think that it's been proven and shown that you cannot rely completely on the portal to field an elite roster or a great roster. It's just too inconsistent year to year in the portal. It is always going to be best to be recruiting at a high level. And that's what these teams are doing this season. So we move on to the next criteria. And so we have arrived at the final criteria. Spoiler, this is the last one. Must be preseason top 6. Now, we don't have an official preseason poll, but I went ahead and did kind of an aggregate based off of everybody's way too early top 25s of who the consensus top 6 was, and the teams that were in common across the top 6 are counted here. So Oregon, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Georgia, according to my criteria, are the teams that can win the national title in 2024. If you're wondering, well, last year, what teams did you come up with? Did you get it right? Last year, the teams I came up with was Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. So we did get the team that won the national title in that group. So out of these 5, I think this is completely fair, especially when you factor in what these teams did this offseason. Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas did some absolutely ridiculous things in NIL and through the portal. Notre Dame strengthened their roster with Riley Leonard, brings in a new offensive coordinator. They're looking like they're going to be really good with a lot of continuity coming back in the secondary as well. And then Georgia is Georgia. They also did some impressive things, not that they even needed to, because they're still going to be favored to win the national title. And so these are the 5 teams, and I honestly am really satisfied with this group of 5 teams coming out. I would almost argue these are the top 5 teams in the country. I still haven't decided where I'm going to put Notre Dame. I think I put them at 5 in my initial top 25, and some people didn't like that. But let me know down in the comments, do you think I got it right? Do you think these are the 5 teams that can win the national title in 2024? Or maybe there's some other teams that you think definitely could win the national title but aren't included in the final 5. And if that's the case, let me know what your teams are down in the comments. I'd be happy to debate you about whether or not I think that they're capable of. So that's it. So there you have it, the 5 teams that can win the national title. Thank you guys so much for watching. As usual, if you enjoyed the content, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other videos you would like me to do on here. I'm always listening and looking out for other ideas, especially in the off season. We're going to continue to do some conference deep dives. We're going to do the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big Ten. So look for those videos to roll out later this week. I've got some other ones, including team-specific breakdowns that I think we're going to hit as well. But hey, thanks so much for 1,000 subscribers, guys. We are not even close to finished, and we're just going to continue to push in the right direction here. If you're coming from TikTok, thank you so much. If you're just discovering me on YouTube, welcome to the team. We've also got a TikTok. We've got a Twitter as well. Feel free to follow on all those if you enjoy the content here. But thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.